Hello and welcome to a special edition of 16 by 9, The Bigger Picture. Tonight our show celebrates the human spirit with stories of inspiration and hope for the holidays. Our first story is about unconditional generosity and the gift of life to a dying man. There is something very special about these three people. They are connected by a bond that most of us will never experience, but one that should inspire us all.
I'm the lucky one, they're my family now.
This incredible story begins with Christopher Mueller, one of those unsung heroes in the world of medical research. Christopher worked tirelessly at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, to help find a cure for breast cancer. How ironic, then, that he should be suddenly faced with his own mortality.
They were able to diagnose me with a disease called primary sclerosing cholangitis. So the bile ducts start to get blocked, and when that happens, the bile can't basically leave the liver. And because it's so toxic, it starts to damage the liver.
What were you feeling? What were the effects of this bad liver?
You basically have a death sentence.
Doctors gave Chris only one option, a liver transplant, but he wasn't exactly at the top of the transplant list.
Basically, I was never going to get called because you have to be the sickest person to be the next one up for the operation.
Unlike other organs, the liver can partially regenerate itself, sometimes in a matter of weeks. In the case of a live donor, a piece of liver is surgically removed and transplanted into the recipient. Liver transplants may sound routine, but there are potentially serious complications for the donor, even the risk of death. So the only other choice was a live donor. Christopher and his wife Sally started the search. All their friends and family were tested, but unfortunately there were no matches. So the Muellers had to go in search of a perfect stranger, someone who would give him the ultimate gift of life.
The first step in that was going to the Queen's Alumni Review. It goes out to over 100,000 people apparently, so it's a great way of getting in touch with people.
Good morning, it's Sarah Crosby from the K-Rock Morning Crew.
One of those email responses came from Sarah Crosby, a Queen's alumnus who co-hosts a local morning radio show on K-Rock in Kingston.
There was a small item, it was only 2 lines long, saying, "My name is Sally Milne. My husband Chris Mueller is a cancer researcher at Queen's. He needs your help. Would you consider donating part of your liver?" And that's all it said. But it was so fascinating that I brought it into K-Rock and said, I don't know what we're going to do with this, but we have to do something. K-Rock is a rock station. Finding livers is not really our niche.
But since rock and roll and good causes always seem to go hand in hand, the radio station invited Christopher's wife of 22 years, Sally, to go on the air. What happened next moved everyone to tears.
Sally came in on the show and she sat right where I'm sitting and pulled the mic really close to her face and opened up and told us this wonderful story about her husband. And she said he was the love of her life.
Chris is the other half of me. We've been married for 22 years and we're one of those couples that are always together, always hanging out together. He couldn't ask people to do this for himself.
To be a morning radio host, we're used to gabbing, and Sally made this plea on the radio, and then my co-host and I just looked at each other and went,
The response to Sally's plea was overwhelming, but it would only take one person to answer Chris and Sally's prayers. Her name was Sherry Edmonds. The 22-year-old had just returned to Kingston after doing volunteer work in Thailand. Her ambition, to be a police officer. A friend of Sherry had told her about the emotional plea on the radio. Sherry agreed to be tested and turned out to be a perfect match.
There's confidentiality. They want to keep the donor and recipient, especially when it's an anonymous situation like this, even though we knew her name and had exchanged a few emails, they really discouraged us from getting in contact with her.
So on August 24th, Christopher and Sherry, not ever having met, had a date at Toronto General Hospital. Sherry would give 70% of her liver to Christopher in an operation that would take hours.
What kind of a incision do you have?
It goes from here, so basically right between your breastbone,
Here?
all the way down to there, basically your navel, and all the way across.
Wow. For you and the donor?
Yes. You know, I woke up the next day, obviously in a lot of pain, very groggy, but having made it through.
Soon after the operation, doctors wanted Chris up and around. But as he wandered down the hallways of the ward, Christopher had a moment he calls cathartic.
Down the hall, I could see a young woman in the exact same situation. Tubes coming out of her all over the place, with a walker and a couple of physiotherapists beside her. And I knew it was her. I knew it was Sherry.
Was it an emotional moment?
Oh yeah, I sobbed like a baby. Because it was clear when I saw her that she was in pain. And that was very, very difficult to accept, that somebody had to go through that much pain for me.
At this point in the interview with Chris, we had to stop taping because we could hear sobbing from the kitchen.
Do I hear somebody crying? Oh yeah. It's all good tears around here.
Christopher's wife, Sally, and donor Sherry were waiting to be interviewed.
It's the bond that we have that it's so much. What came out of this is so much more than we could ever have hoped for.
Sherry, why the emotion for you?
The acceptance and the love that they have for me, just take me as I am, and I couldn't ask for more.
Before we even knew Sherry, we loved her. Chris and I were never able to have children, but it must be kind of like when you see your child for the first time, you know.
After the tears had subsided somewhat, we mic'd both women and asked Sally and Sherry to share more of their amazing story.
Sherry, did they ever present to you the fact that you might die? Something might go wrong?
There is like a 0.1 to 2% chance of that.
Since the operation, Christopher, Sally, and Sherry have become inseparable.
How much time are you guys spending together?
Oh, a lot. You know, 3 or 4 times a week we have dinner together, and we're in touch pretty much every day. You know, also, I mean, Sherry has been in a period of recovery, and so has Chris, so...
Yeah, it's a special time.
Yeah, I used to be the only woman in his life, but now there's 2 of us.
Sherry says doctors have told her her liver is almost back to normal. She plans on becoming a police officer just as soon as she's fully recovered.
Is it alive?
Yes, they are alive.
Christopher, meanwhile, is back to work, giving hope to thousands of Canadian women who face their own frightening diagnosis.
One thing that I've always been dedicated to is cancer research. And I really feel that now I've been given a second chance and want to make a difference. I want to make a difference in, you know, women's lives on an everyday basis. So hopefully that is part of it.